Welcome back. Welcome to another episode of Nain's Shorts Training. That's always the topic at hand. Why do we do it? Because we're crazy. Let's face it. Martial artists is full of a lot of oddballs, and I love it because I'm definitely one of them. And I continue training because it's just something I really enjoy doing. I hope it's something you really enjoy doing, and that's what we talk about. We talk about the training aspect of it. How do we pass it on? How do we keep it alive? How do we make sure that our art lasts long after we're gone, hopefully? But lately we've been thinking about that idea, the art itself. Now, for many people, the art carries a lot of history, a lot of other shoulders that are beneath them, propping them up to the level that they are now. Not to mention the history and the cultural aspect of a lot of these arts are very intertwined. You can't separate one without the other. And that's awesome because that too is a way to preserve history, and I think it's very important for those arts to continue, the more traditional arts, the ones that have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. That being said, we've talked about very often about the evolution of arts and how they were way back when they were first created. And because of the social influences along the way, they've morphed. Maybe in some aspects, the originator of that art didn't share all his secrets with them, or they were just lost throughout time because of how large schools became. They had to change the way that they teach, and they had to limit the amount of information that could be disseminated to a large class, which is one of the reasons why in the Blade of Mind Ronin we keep our classes small so we can focus on the individuals, and eventually they develop their own way of moving, which we've said many times before. But this particular conversation is about the similarities that we noticed when we were playing with a good friend of ours, Senior Grandmaster Ron Liu, or as he tells them to call him, Ron. Shout out to you, Ron. You're an awesome individual, and we had a great time getting to play with you just a couple of days ago. Can't wait to do it again. That was actually really cool. And as we're observing the information that he's giving us and the way that he moves, Rick noticed something interesting. And he noticed that there was a lot of similarities between what Ron Liu was doing and Bobby Tawada's Balintawak. And we discussed this in length in reference to, well, what are the similarities? Well, one, the thought process is it's a stick. It's not a sword. It's not a facsimile of the sword. It is just a stick. Therefore, grabbing the stick, stripping all that, locking while holding onto the stick is very doable because that's all it is. It's just a stick. It's not a blade. Case in point, this is a facsimile of a blade. So when playing with this, my first thought would not be to grab it. But because it's a stick, they do that sort of thing. And not to mention the range itself, close quarter range. Very similar to the way that Balintawak does that. However, they don't come from the same lineage. Ron Liu studied under Kakoi Cañete of Doce Paras. And that really got me to thinking, okay, what are the similarities, but then what are the differences? Because Kakoi himself has other brothers that he sort of stepped away from or differentiated himself by the way he approached his training. His siblings did and added other things from my limited information, added more of the fencing ideas from Spain, and a bit more of a longer range. While Kakoi, he went straight to close range. Everything was right there. So, two different histories in the art, two different training modalities, but eventually getting together and coming up with very similar ideas, if not the same ideas. Maybe the verbiage is different, but the ideas were still very much the same in the range that they play, in the way that they move about their stick, the way they handle the stick of the opponent, and that the way they get around it to get these shots. That Ron Liu says, aren't finishers, but you're just peppering the guy. You're getting their mind off everything so you can get that one good shot that's going to end that fight. Because eventually, that's what you're trying to do, or inevitably, is end the fight. In other words, this is a mentality that's more geared for a physical altercation, for actual contact with somebody that's trying to beat you and you're trying to beat them. Not for demonstrations, not for upholding the history of it, but pure application. And when you start thinking about context like that, then, okay, in a real fight, what range are you really in? At what point of contact are you no longer in the ranges that you train in or the distance that you're accustomed to? Somebody running at you, trying to hit you, well, they close that gap very fast. So if you're comfortable in medium to long range, well, that range is gone automatically. And we talked about this last week, how many arts had so many aspects of them at the beginning, but then one person chose to focus on one idea, such as grappling or joint locking or throws, while another focused solely on the weapons, another one solely on the empty hand stuff. Even though they came from the same art, it eventually became so many different things because of the focus. Now, what we didn't talk about is what was the mentality of that individual that took it in a different direction. What were they trying to accomplish? Were they trying to accomplish a goal? Were they limited physically and could only do those things? Therefore, that's all they focused on? But at the end of the day, if we were to apply those concepts to a real fight, could we use everything that we know for that fight? Everything that we've learned, all the forms, all the movements, all the katas and the pinyons, could we use them all for the actual fight? And we could be very divided on this idea because some will say yes, some will say no. The way that we've come about it is that yes, you can use a lot of that stuff, but not the way that it's taught. And we're not the only ones that say this. We're not the only ones that think this, because I've seen it in traditional arts. You go through the curriculum, you learn it, you get to a certain level of your ranking, and then all of a sudden the good instructors will tell you, but the opponent on the street isn't going to attack you this way. They're not going to set up, they're not going to pull back their arm, and they're not going to throw a straight right punch. No, they're probably going to throw a haymaker. They're probably going to try to use whatever little tactics they can, but regardless of whatever it is that they're doing, they have to get close enough to hit you. Because again, we don't carry weapons. Some people carry knives, guns, different story altogether, but let's stick to the knife and hands. They have to get in a certain range to hit you. At the point of contact, that's close range. So if you haven't trained and gotten comfortable with close range, throwing punches and kicks, or receiving punches and kicks, well then, again, how much of what you've learned can be used in that fight if that thought process hasn't been introduced to you yet, or never trained at all. And that's how we've sort of approached what we teach. It just became a logical thought process, is when does a real fight actually happen, and where does it happen in relation to the opponent? What range are you really in? Because if somebody is too far away to actually hit you, they have their hands up and they're posturing and they're talking shit and all this and that, and they look like they're going to do something, but all they're doing is bouncing around too far away from you to even hit you. Are you actually in a fight? Or is this person just an idiot? You're not in a fight. No one's touching anyone. No one's hurting anyone. And as a martial artist, we could say that our mentality is, okay, I'm not getting hurt. I'm not being attacked. So I don't need to do anything. I just need to get away from the situation. And that's the mental aspect of it. But the physical aspect of it is that it's not a fight because no one's hurting anyone. No one's even close enough to touch anyone, and that's the range that we play. And we notice that we too have that same mentality as Ron Liu and what we can imagine Bobby Tawada to have. At least based on what we've seen of Balintawak, I can definitely say that of Ron Liu because I actually played with him. And we were doing hooking. Now, we use the puño of our stick and we like to hook. But you only can really do that at close range, and it only becomes effective at that range. And he gave us a more dynamic understanding of what we could do with it, but he didn't have to teach us how to do it because we've already done it. And the way that we came about it is, again, just that logical thought process that in a fight, we're going to get to this point where we both have to be able to make contact, and that's close range. You can talk about the kicks being long range and things like that, but I've had GMs tell me about the fights they had when they were younger and how much of it was fists. Only at the end, when the guy was staggered, they would throw that one kick, and then that's all anyone ever remembered was that one kick. But everything else was punches, elbows, pushes, and then the kick came. Again, close range. Your hands have to be close enough to actually do something. And because of that, Rick thought, okay, well then let's take out all the stuff that doesn't get us in that range, that doesn't give us the things, the tools, the skill sets, and the mentality to be able to, one, be comfortable in that range, and then be able to do something significant in that range. Because that's where the fight really happens. Danny used to have this example that said a real fight is like this, and then somebody falls. And there's a lot of truth to that. And I can only say that based on my experience talking to people and witnessing fights, but never actually being in one. So I rely a lot on you, the viewers, that share their experiences with me, as well as all the people that I've gotten to talk to, like Ron Liu, who have that experience, who have been in situations where this is effective, this isn't effective. And even Rico, who has that mentality and logically concluded, well, if we don't need all this stuff, we're not going to use it. Granted, we don't actually have all the other stuff. We don't have the rest of the system that we got our information from. And the truth is, it didn't even have to be Filipino martial arts. It could have been anything else. For those of you who know Rick personally, have seen him move, you'll see Wing Chun in there. You'll see Kempo in the way that he moves. It doesn't look exactly like it because he doesn't have the rigid forms anymore. And that's also because it doesn't seem logical to keep those forms. But there's a lot of essence of those arts in everything that he does, packaged around Filipino martial arts, which again, we only had a few things from a particular system. We don't have a full system, or we don't come from a full system because all that extra stuff didn't seem logical to keep in. And that's how we've developed the Bladed Mind Ronin, is thinking about what happens in an actual fight. And I honestly believe that if every single martial art dives deep enough in that direction, we will all reach the same conclusions. Sure, we're going to say them differently, and our approach may be a little different per individual, but we're going to reach the same ideas and the same concepts. Because at the end of the day, conflict between two people is hands and feet. And that's it. That's all we really have to work with. So, yeah, that's how we came about that. It's just a concept and an idea to discuss further. What do you guys think? Are we all the same, or is there too much difference to say that, okay, that's not going to work? Definitely your opinion. This is just mine. I'm sharing it with you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you liked it. Hope you share. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll catch you on the next one. Till then, 3, 2, 1, cut!